There's a song, Livin' on a Prayer, co-written by John Bon Jovi, Richie Sambora, and song doctor Desmond Child, that became the second number one hit from Slippery When Wet, which propelled the album to a total of 15 weeks at number one. Yet, John Bon Jovi has a confession to make about living on a prayer.
I could tell you that I didn't think much of it. It was so different than anything we had done before, and with the key change and what was to become the bass line, that when we wrote it, and I remember Richie wasn't feeling well, we wrote it in New York City.
Co-writer Richie Sambora's recollection of writing the song Livin' on a Prayer is vividly bad.
I got very, very drunk on Jack Daniels. and then I just remembered, I said, oh man, I'm expected in New York City tomorrow at like 10 a.m. over at Desmond's apartment to do this thing. And I sat down at the piano and I was very drunk. And I had just that chord change that was, going from the C to the D and the E minor, and I just held a E note over it, and I just had this one word in my mind called prayer, that because I didn't know what I was going to do. I wanted to show up with something with these guys. So anyway, I got there very late. There was an extreme amount of traffic. I was throwing up in a Lincoln Tunnel, turning green. Then I couldn't find a parking place. I had to walk in the rain to the house, and they had already been starting something else, and I didn't look good. Let's face it, when I walked in. And they were writing something that I particularly I just went, man, that's not happening. This just wasn't happening. I said, look, I got this. I said, look, I got one word, prayer. And then these chord changes. And
what did you play it on? What did you play it for?
It was a piano, just a regular piano over in Desmond. He had this real songwriting loft kind of thing. It just kind of started there, and then we all jumped in. And at the end of the day, we had the first verse and B section in the chorus. And I just, man, John and I got in the cab after that, going back to my car from Desmond's place, and I go, John, this is going to be a big song. He goes, nah, we're going to give it to some movie soundtrack. He just wasn't connected to it yet. And then when we finished it, he realized that it was going to be a big one for us. And of course, that was, I think it's probably one of the best songs that we've written as a band.
One of the best rock songs of the last quarter century, brilliantly produced by the late Bruce Fairbairn. That's Bon Jovi's Livin' on a Prayer from the 1986 third album, Slippery When Wet. Here's John Bon Jovi.
These two kids had given up everything to be in love and to pursue what they hoped was going to be a future together. And be it what may, they were ready to commit. And at that age, and with the future that looked rather bright, that was very brave of them. I'm happy to say that, though not all of the road was smooth, 20 years later, and 26 years later since they've been married, they're still married. And at 44, to be married for 26 years is a long time.
Are you telling me that the characters in Livin' on a Prayer are based on real people?
Yeah. Their names were changed to protect the innocent. But there was a young couple that I knew that were struggling because, I guess I could tell the story now, and not that it is anything to be embarrassed by, but she got pregnant very early. They were both in school, and they had great aspirations to do other things in their lives. And, he, especially his parents, who struggled so hard to put him in this school, he had to walk away from all of it and go and get a job that it wasn't necessarily what he'd looked forward to doing with his life, and compromises were made. But I gave him such respect because of what they had, set out to do and did, and have subsequently raised two very healthy and happy kids. And but they were the role models for what the characters became.
Do they
Oh, sure.
That?
Trust me. They know. Yeah. Every year, whenever we're going to, and 20 tickets for, and I need 30 tickets for, okay.
Well, at least it's not the publishing.
No, it's not the publishing. But no, true. Yes, and I've given them credit for it many times.
Coming up next, why your copy of Slippery When Wet probably does not have a pink cover. And if it does, why it's worth a bundle.
Hi, this is Richie Sambora. In the studio.
Hi, this is John Bon Jovi of Bon Jovi, and you are in the studio for the anniversary celebration of Slippery When Wet.
Thanks again, guys. Welcome back to the 25th anniversary of Slippery When Wet. Bon Jovi played third bill during the 1985 Texas Jam in the Cotton Bowl in Dallas on August 24, 1985. They closed their set that day with a song that was not on either of their first two albums, a very risky move. But by the end of the song, as I stood behind the band, making the stage literally rock to the beat, Bon Jovi had the enormous stadium crowd of 70,000 singing the chorus of Raise Your Hand. This was a full year before it would appear on Slippery When Wet. I asked John Bon Jovi what ingredients he felt were underdeveloped prior to that breakthrough album.
I was becoming very aware that I was able to move a stadium. I knew how to find the person in the back row and let them believe that I was looking right at them, which I was doing my best to make sure that I was, and contacting and having contact with them. So if it was the innocence of youth that made you write a song like, something as simple as Raise Your Hand, at least there was interaction between me and that audience. And I knew how to work that thing. It was just something that I was quite comfortable doing. Everybody finds their niche, and those who survive and those who make any kind of mark in our business find something that is definitively theirs. And there have been some great examples of, Stevie Ray was always going to be Stevie Ray. That you just knew every time you heard that Stratocaster that was Stevie. Or when Hendrix played, you just knew that was Hendrix playing the guitar. When you saw Bruce as a performer or Bono as a performer, you knew the kind of power that they had. I knew how to work that audience and work them up. And that probably came from a wide array of influences, but nonetheless, it was different than the genre of music I was participating in. So when you wrote those kind of songs and you added the big hook, it became our genre. It became our personal little niche.
Here's some rock trivia for you. What's the only Diamond Award-winning album for sales in excess of 10 million copies with a hefty trash bag for a cover? The answer? Bon Jovi Slippery When Wet. Why? For the true story, here's John Bon Jovi with me in the studio.
So we went down to a bar that we would frequent, and those bars were, they were go-go bars. And Vancouver's go-go bars were, pretty forward-thinking at the time.
World
and
class.
Women, they were world-class. And see how political I'm being the way I'm saying this, but they would shower. And they were totally nude. And in these 3-song sets, each of these women would shower. And after a few cocktails, the joke was, boy, but that's Slippery and Slippery When Wet came up. And so we thought, what an interesting cover. Obviously, the woman couldn't be nude. But if this beautiful girl had her picture taken in a soapy shower and wrote Slippery When Wet on the glass. And the photographer took the picture. And obviously we weren't there. And the art director at the label art directed the picture and cropped the shot. And now remember, this is in an era before fax machines, let alone internet. And we were 3,000 plus miles away in Vancouver, not in New York City. And all you saw was this girl from her lips down to her navel, and the T-shirt saying Slippery When Wet. He didn't write it on the glass. It's not soapy enough. But I'm not crazy about it. Well, we got home, and we had turned the master in, and I saw the artwork that was being printed up, and it was the day that this was going to print. The album cover was hot pink, and I had just, and we as a rock and roll community had just witnessed what hot pink did to a certain artist during a video. And I'll never forget who that artist was. And I thought, pink, why pink? And the art director said it matched her nail polish. And I went over my dead body. So we went in to see the CEO, president of the label at the time, who says, but I've printed up 500,000 album jackets. And we said, this will be the demise of the band. You like the record. We like the record. Please don't do this. He said, if you don't turn in artwork tonight, we have to delay the release of the record, and the single is already out. Now what are you going to do? And I went to the same photographer, Mark Weiss, and I shot a garbage bag with a squirt bottle of water. But it looked like the galaxy. It looked like stars. And so I said, wait. Shoot it again with the water. And I wrote with my fingers, Slippery When Wet. And I said, there's your album cover. I said, remember Back in Black? Here's your album cover. Forget it. Just turn it in. The music was more important than the art to me. And boom, there it was. And he burned not all of, but all of the domestic and European copies of the album cover.
That was
the only ones that were out were already released in Japan.
That was
The
my
imports.
next question was, did any of them ever sneak out into production, and how rare are those?
Though they're very, very, very rare. They were strictly the first run of the Japanese import. But in those days, Japan had a longer lead time. And it squeaked out over there. But that was the only place.
Do you think Slippery's success changed the way rock and roll was made from there on? How do you think it changed the business?
At that time, I remember seeing somebody say they made, hard rock accessible to women and to the masses. And there's validity in that statement. It was Dee Snider who I saw say that. And he's right, because all of a sudden the guys who were going to see AC/DC and those guys are ZZ or Scorpions and those kind of bands, suddenly they saw me on TV 20 years ago, and you sing "You Give Love a Bad Name" to a girl, and bang zoom, the poster industry got a big spike. There was a lot of influence in girls' bedrooms. There was pictures of us.
Yes, that's
true.
And
it was a #1 single. And remember, there wasn't even a category in the Grammys for hard rock.
You're right. You're right.
When an album called "Slippery When Wet" came out, that's when the category was created.
That's a good point.
It didn't exist before then. Being on the cover of Rolling Stone and having a #1, or a couple of #1 singles on that record, it did make it much more friendly. It put it from being, a rock band that, unless you were a fan of that genre of music, you didn't know if I was from Canada or France, or if it was my first and last name. You really had to read Circus Magazine to find out who we were. But when Slippery came out, you could see, my name in Time magazine, and that was yes, it most definitely had an impact.
Have you since made an album as good as or better than Slippery When Wet?
I think so. I think so. The thing that Slippery has on it was naivete and the exuberance of youth, and that's fabulous. I mean, there was nothing else in your life but making that record. There was no families, there was no money, there was no house, there was no anything other than making that record. And that is a beautiful thing. But I think that I've made better albums as a whole, because there's songs on that record that I wouldn't, think about playing live. But on the other hand, Wanted and Prayer and Bad Name and a couple of the others on there I think hold up very, very well. But every time you make an album, it's the best album you've ever done. Every time you release a track, you think it has a validity there that the last one didn't. Sure, Slippery was a phenomena, and I'm proud to say it's mine. But I thought Have a Nice Day was, a better record. I thought that Bounce was a better record. But that's probably just because they're more recent.
John and I compared the many favorable reviews from those first 4 albums. Since that time, it seems that critical response has sometimes been inversely proportional to Bon Jovi being one of the most popular bands in the world.
No one cared in the first 2 records. It was with the third one, and I think it took so many people by surprise that they couldn't be as cruel as they wanted to be, because it was just such a phenomena. It wasn't until the 4th album, New Jersey, that I thought that the fingers were pointing at us. I think it is people music. It's folk music. That, like that old commercial said, it's music for folks. It doesn't make it any better, but it certainly doesn't make it any worse than the most critically acclaimed, band that there might be out there. And I'm a huge fan of a lot of those kinds of bands, but there's a place for all of it. And anyone who plays music, or anyone who's ever really listened to appreciate music, knows that the magic that music brings, I think it's such an influence on all the other art forms, be it painting or writing a book or a play or a screenplay, or, I just really believe that it has influence on, obviously, dance and on theater as well. So music to me is the heartbeat of what makes people move emotionally. And I've been on the receiving and on the giving end of that.
A quick Bon Jovi update. The band just wrapped up an extensive tour in Europe just this past week.